Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Monday. We hope you had a good weekend. And now we're back to a firestorm over the president's comments on Sunday morning about 4 Democratic women congressmen, women of color. The president using racist tropes to call them out. He says, and see, here it is, he says, why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then they can come back and show us how it's done. A short time ago, after being condemned by Democrats, Nancy Pelosi calling for a resolution in the House condemning the president's comments. Even a Republican senator, Tim Scott of South Carolina, saying these were unacceptable personal attacks. The president in the White House South Lawn doubled down.
Do you think the tweets were racist?
Not at all.
Do you think those Democratic congresswomen are not American?
Somebody has a problem with our country. If somebody doesn't want to be in our country, they should leave. That's all.
Are those congresswomen not American?
When you look at her statements on Al-Qaeda, did you see her statements on Al-Qaeda? When you look at her statements about people...
Which congresswomen are you talking about?
But aren't you talking about
congresswomen are you talking about?
sir? Isn't this...
And I want to bring in now our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, who was the one asking those questions just to the left of the screen. Cecilia, thanks for coming on. A pretty extraordinary attack by the President of the United States, something we have almost never seen on this level against members of Congress.
Yeah, a completely remarkable moment out here, Devin. And, you know, the president is not just defending his tweets about those 4 congresswomen. He is saying that they weren't racist, and he's really digging in on them. He says that these women, these 4 U.S. congresswomen, hate our country, that they should leave. He says he's not at all concerned about the criticism that he's receiving today. Frankly, people calling these tweets outright racist, or people thinking, frankly, that this is racist. In some ways, Devin, we've talked about this. This isn't surprising. There has been a pattern leading up to this. This is the president who campaigned on birtherism, who ended up in the White House, partly because he was promoting a conspiracy theory that Barack Obama wasn't necessarily born in this country, that he was born in Africa. You'll remember the day that he launched his campaign in New York when he said Mexicans were rapists and some of them were good people. Of course, we think back to Charlottesville, where the president said that there were very fine people on both sides in that neo-Nazi rally. What is different about this is an American president normalizing this type of racist language in a very public way. And Devin, you know this, we've been talking about this here at ABC all day. The white nationalists are really eating these tweets up and praising the president. He's inspired them. And one very prominent website saying today, quote, "This is exactly the kind of white nationalism that we need."
Which put up a picture of the 4 women that he is attacking. Remind our viewers who these people are. All 4 of them, I guess we can't pull it up right now, but all 4, there they are. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts. 3 of the 4 born in the United States, all 4 U.S. citizens. And Cecilia, as you alluded to there, these white supremacist groups are praising the president. And in fact, he was pressed about it on the South Lawn. And here's how he answered that.
If you're not happy here, then you can leave. As far as I'm concerned, if you hate our country, if you're not happy here, you can leave. And that's what I say all the time. That's what I said in a tweet, which I guess some people think is controversial. A lot of people love it, by the way. A lot of people love it. If weak politicians want to say, and the Democrats in this case, if they want to gear their wagons around these 4 people, I think they're going to have a very tough election, because I don't think the people of the United States will stand for it.
Mr. President,
Does it concern you that many people saw that tweet as racist, and that white nationalist groups are finding common cause with you on that point?
It doesn't concern me because many people agree with me.
It doesn't concern the president that white supremacists, white nationalists are embracing him. That was John Roberts of Fox News asking the question. Cecilia, this reminds a lot of people of that Charlottesville moment when the president came out and said there were good people on both sides. It made a lot of White House staff pretty uncomfortable. Are you getting any sense over there in the West Wing that there's any distance from the president on this one, any discomfort?
It's certainly making a lot of people uncomfortable here, and it has been fascinating to watch people try to do a not-so-graceful dance today, particularly when they are on camera, of offering up a word salad of defense. I mean, this is really a tough thing to defend, and it's an almost impossible thing to spin. What I'm hearing is people not necessarily defending the president, but no one that I've spoken to today or heard from personally or on camera is willing to go as far as to say that these tweets are outright racist. And Devin, only now, more than 24 hours after the president sent those tweets, are we starting to hear a call of criticism and from Republicans denouncing these tweets as well.
Yeah, 24 hours later, and tepid at best on that front as well. Cecilia Vega, our chief White House correspondent. Thanks so much, Cecilia. For more on this now, I want to bring in our White House reporter, Rachel Scott. Ben Siegel, our Capitol Hill reporter, who has a fact check for us. Also want to bring in Mike Muse with SiriusXM, who is joining us from New York. He's an analyst. Great to see you, Mike. And our Serena Marshall is up on Capitol Hill right now, tracking reaction from members of Congress. Rachel, I want to start with you, though. A lot of people wondering, you cover the Trump campaign. Why now? Why did the president stick his finger into this on a sunny Sunday morning just before going to play golf?
And I think the big question, too, is will his political base actually care that people are calling this racist, outright racist? It's reminiscent of racist tropes. I mean, it's a racist trope. And I think that one of the tests will be at the president's rally this week. But I just got a fresh campaign statement from the president's communications director saying that all Democrats have now leapt to the defense of the Blame America First crowd when they really should be defending America. And they say that the president was simply pointing out that Democrats have said terrible things about this country.
And we were actually just putting up, we can put it back up. I was recalling today of 2 years ago, then campaign strategist, White House strategist Steve Bannon said this in an interview. He actually said this was part of his strategy that he wanted the Trump campaign to play. So the Democrats, the longer they talk about identity politics, I got them. I want them to talk about racism every day. If the left is focused on race and identity, and we go with economic nationalism, we can crush the Democrats. Certainly something that is sort of resonates here, echoes of Steve Bannon in what the campaign is doing now. We should say that none of the campaign people would come on.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, you just heard Cecilia talk about the pattern that the president has used, talking about race in this country. And racism is not new, but as Cecilia said, the president is elevating these remarks on a national stage. And have we seen any shift? Has any of his supporters moved over to the other side and said, listen, I'm not going to support the president? When I'm out in the field and I talk to some of these supporters, they say, listen, I hear the president, I hear what he's saying, but the economy is doing great. And the question is, will this sway any of his base, or will it just simply get them riled up?
Yeah, and what will the middle think of all this? Ben Siegel, let's just do a quick look at the facts. The president throwing around a lot of claims in this tirade on the South Lawn today, on top of the tweet suggesting that these congresswomen are not from here. They, as we said, are all American citizens. They're born here. They've given no indication they want to leave the country. But the president also accused some of them of being supporters of al-Qaeda. Is that true?
It's not true. Basically, what the president was doing, and this is something that's made the rounds on Fox News, on conservative media, these four members of Congress that you've seen are sort of punching bags for the right. They're people who conservatives in Congress and the president have repeatedly criticized. They're people that their Republican strategists are hoping to tie the party to. They're very progressive, very liberal. And specifically today, he accused Ilhan Omar of supporting al-Qaeda, of proudly saying al-Qaeda. We dug into that a little bit. He seemed to be referring to a clip that's been taken out of context from a public affairs show she did in 2013 before she was in Congress. It was part of a nuanced context, really specific discussion about the use of Arabic words to describe some of these terrorist groups, and she was talking about a professor she had in college. So she was not saying anything about associating with al-Qaeda.
And she is the center of so much of this criticism the president has, because she's the first elected Muslim woman in Congress. So she's sort of this high-profile figure. She said some very controversial things about Israel and about Jews, which have been condemned by the House of Representatives, right, as well. The president accused her of being an anti-Semite.
Sure. She's been accused of pretty loose talk around her criticism of Israel on policy grounds. She's in the past waded into hot water about comments about the influence of the pro-Israel lobby, accused of trafficking in some anti-Semitic tropes. That's led some members of the House, Republicans and Democrats, to come out and criticize her. It led to eventually a motion on the House floor to condemn anti-Semitism. Did not mention Congresswoman Omar by name, but it was meant as a rebuke to her. And to your point with Rachel earlier in the this conversation. This is a conversation that the president is having, and it's also having an effect on Capitol Hill. This week, Democrats are not talking about their agenda for the people. They're spending all their time attacking the president, and they were having a bit of an inter-family fight earlier this week about the vision for the party. This has brought them together, but it's also sort of derailed their vision and their policy vision for the country.
So the president's comments certainly part of a political strategy, or appearing like one, taking the Democrats off message. But Mike Muse, the spin machine is in full gear in Trump campaign land. The deflection operation taking place. They wouldn't come on the show to talk about the president's comments, but clearly here they are trying to draw attention away from the fact that "go back to where you came from" is an unambiguous racist trope.
Absolutely. There's so many things that have been wrong with this statement, and there's so many things that have been wrong that's concerned me throughout the weekend as President Trump has made this statement. But the most jarring aspect of it is how the Republican Party has not come out full force, full stop to denounce this type of rhetoric. There's a danger when you are sitting within the Oval Office. The Oval Office means something not only to America, but to the globe, to our global society, to our global community. And it's important that whoever is in that space, whoever is in that seat, it's really set the standard into what America is and really who we are. And let me tell you, Devin, it's not comfortable as a black man, as I sit here speaking with you, to even have to have these type of discussions that are coming from the civil rights era, that are coming from the Jim Crow era. When it comes back about go back to where you come from, go back to Africa, these are the things that we've heard of as if we are come from a foreign place, right? It's almost as if we don't have a right to be here, but it goes to a larger narrative as we talk about the First Amendment, as we talk about freedom of speech, as we talk about censorship, as if we don't have the opportunity to critique our government, to critique our democracy, to make it better, and to really bring it into the fullness of what we know it could be. It's also a troubling truth to hear President Trump show his ignorance on what it is to be an American as he sets to redefine what American value is, but also, too, who is an American, all the way from the fact that he doesn't recognize that being from Puerto Rican descent, you are an American citizen. But that dovetails right into the whole issue of the hurricane that happened and the relief that has yet to happen, and this whole notion of xenophobia that Puerto Ricans aren't Americans, but they are American citizens. And then it concerns me about how we go into an immigration debate, about how you're not aware of how Representative Omar is actually a naturalized citizen, which makes her a United States citizen. And so there is troubling effect when someone is sitting in the Oval Office who doesn't understand the basics of the historical nature of racism, who doesn't understand the basicness of what freedom of speech and censorship is, but yet this is the individual who's going to be setting a tone for our immigration to where we have a huge backdrop of what's happening in ICE over the weekend. So it really is going back to this othering, and it's troubling that these individuals are people of color, right? And so that's what it goes back to it, and that there are also two freshman class members who have a right to speak out. And so we're treading into a very dangerous position here in America when you start using this. My concern, Devin, also too is security and safety of these four members of Congress. For the fact for the president to rise this troping, right, to rise this fear, to rise this othering on these Congress people. They've already have received death threats already. The president isn't helping with this. And there is a danger when you cannot critique your government to be fearful of your life. Even as American citizens, we begin to critique on social media, on platforms such as ABC, those of us who are people of color, do we have to now be concerned with our safety because the president has rose to this type of level?
Yeah, it certainly raised some pretty disturbing responses from the white supremacist community. Those death threats are really troubling. Ben, on the Hill, I mean, you've dealt with Capitol Hill police. They have had to step up protection of these women as well. And
it's worth pointing out that Congresswoman Omar in particular, who the president singled out, has, in some of these comments she's made in the past that she's been criticized for, they've had to step up her security. She's received death threats in the past. And I don't think people understand Capitol Hill is very secure, but when these members go home, they're often alone. There's no security. They're wearing their pins. They can be easily marked out in public.
We all remember the shooting at the baseball practice not far from here. Remember Gabrielle Giffords in the parking lot of that grocery store attacked by a gunman. Serena Marshall, you're up on Capitol Hill. You've been trying to get response to the president's tweets on the other side of the aisle. Republicans just coming back into town from the weekend. Pretty muted response. What have you been hearing?
Devin, trying in vain to get a response from some of these members of Congress. We were walking through the halls of Capitol Hill, going to certain members' offices, asking them if they'd speak on camera. Some of them weren't back yet. It is a travel day for members as votes don't happen until later this evening. But some of them were in their offices. We couldn't convince them to speak to us on camera. Now, when you talk about the reaction from Republicans, remember, it has been more than 24 hours, and we're just starting to see a trickle of a response on Twitter. Those who have spoken on camera, like Senator Lindsey Graham, seem to be defending the president as he told him he should also perhaps tone down the rhetoric.
We're also hearing, Serena, from Tim Scott, the only Republican African-American Republican senator from South Carolina. I believe we have part of his statement. He is talking about how Democrats have also engaged in some racist debate, but then goes on to say that the president's behavior is unacceptable. It's in the bottom half of this statement. Unacceptable personal attacks, racially offensive language. No matter our political disagreements, aiming for the lowest common denominator will only divide our nation further. Susan Collins, Serena, a prominent Republican moderate in the Senate, was also quick to respond this morning, one of the first Republicans. She said he should take the tweet down.
Yeah, you know, you're hearing from some of the more moderate Republicans who are really coming out hard. But like you said, Senator Scott there really was kind of backing the president in the top and then calling it inappropriate in the bottom. So if you don't get through the whole statement, you might miss that. But a lot of Republicans are standing by the president for this, especially members of his own party. We actually heard from Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, just a little bit ago. Here's what he had to say.
As a member of the cabinet, the president today talked pretty extensively about his tweets about these 4 congresswomen. Do you find the president's tweets racist, and what do you make of white nationalists praising those tweets?
Again, I think the president, I don't find them racist. The president just went on and clarified his comments. I think he speaks for himself on that, and he was very clear. But again, we're focused on cryptocurrencies, and then I'll do some debt ceiling stuff.
So Devin, the president saying, or excuse me, Steve Mnuchin saying there that the president clarified his statements because he's now not saying to go back to where you came from, but if you're unhappy in the United States, you should just leave. Now, it is not un-American to question the United States government. In fact, Theodore Roosevelt, and I'm paraphrasing here, said, if it's anything, it is unpatriotic to say you can't question the president, and he called to say that you cannot question the president treasonous. And so for them to try now flip the script on this and point out to what those women, those people might have said in a negative context, so it takes the attention away from what the president said. But remember, this is now uniting the Democratic Party, and as Cecilia was saying earlier, it could be a political game the president's playing, because he would love nothing more than to go up against the far left of the Democratic Party versus those moderates, where polls show him possibly losing the presidential election.
And also just hearing right now from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who says to Republicans, you're making a deal with the devil by your silence in this. Nancy Pelosi going on to say that the president is trying to make America white again. Although there are some in the House, Ben, you're just hearing as a footnote to all of this from a Republican from Texas who is criticizing the president now.
That's right. Will Hurd, African-American from Texas, one of the few moderate Republicans left in the House after the midterms. He did call this racist and xenophobic. But I think to underscore the point that Serena's making, there are so few members like Will Hurd left in Congress after the last election. Many more members like Jim Jordan, who we're also hearing from, in support of Trump and saying the real concern is not with what the president said, but with what Democrats want to do with immigration.
And much more to come on this debate. A lot of accountability to be done as well. Serena Marshall is sticking with us. Mike Muse, thanks for your analysis. We'll be seeing you soon, Mike. Thank you. Ben Siegel, Rachel Scott, thank you both very much. Turning now to the crisis at the border and the Trump administration's immigration crackdown after a weekend of ICE raids across the country that didn't materialize in the way the president has suggested. The White House is out this morning announcing a new policy on asylum seekers, now requiring anybody seeking asylum in the United States from Central America to do so in the first country they step foot in after they leave their home country. This is a sweeping change meant at cracking down on the backlogger. Serena Marshall, back on the Hill, is also tracking this important story and covers immigration for us. Serena, help us understand what exactly the administration announced with respect to asylum.
So, Devin, the administration is saying in this rule change that is effective immediately. It said as soon as it's published in the Federal Register, it'll go into effect, which means those people waiting at the border right now to claim asylum essentially will be denied. They're hoping to stem the flow. But by doing this, they're saying any third-party country that you come through on your way to the United States, if you don't apply for asylum there, you are denied flatly at the United States borders. So it's a huge change to how our asylum laws are actually impacted. It's a change to how the federal government actually processes asylum, which says every asylum claim must be heard and adjudicated in a court system. So we definitely expect a legal challenge to this, especially from some of those nonprofits and immigrant right activists who are saying to say that this rule goes flatly against international law and U.S. law.
Serena Marshall, thank you so much. The issue of asylum seekers is front and center. The Trump administration blames phony asylum claims for being the responsible for the backlogs that we see at those detention centers on the southern border. Our Miriam Khan traveled exclusively with the Vice President of the United States on Friday to see that crowding up close. I caught up with her a little earlier today about her visit to the border.
We visited 2 facilities when we were down there in McAllen, Texas on Friday. The first facility was a processing center. We saw a lot of children, families, and Mike Pence, he, spoke with many of them. He had a translator with him. And then the second facility is where we saw more of the adult men that were detained and more of those conditions that we've been hearing about.
Just bring us inside there. I mean, so few people have been in. You go in with the Vice President of the United States. What's the scene?
So when we first got there, it's the McAllen Border Patrol Station. They, kind of showed us the facility. They gave us a tour of the area. They had snacks and water bottles, things like that, diapers. The other reporter that was on the trip with me, we both started complaining because we're like, this is not the access that we thought we were going to get. We want to see more. And so just as soon as we said it, they immediately took us in to this other detainment center where they actually had these adult men. And as soon as you walk in, you're just slapped in the face with this overwhelming smell and the humidity. And that was the first thing that I noticed, and that's something that I'm still thinking about.
How many people were crammed inside that space?
We were told the exact number was 384 adult men. And they were behind these chain-linked fences. They looked like prison fences. Some men were lying down on the floor, but at no point would it have been possible for any of these men to lie down at one point at the same time. Men are coming closer to the fence to try to engage with us. The other reporter and I are trying to listen to what they're saying. Many of them are speaking Spanish. Some of them are speaking broken English. And they said that they had been kept in there between 30 to 40 days. So
what's going through your mind as a human being? As so few journalists have been allowed into these really crowded facilities, what were you thinking?
It was so surreal. It was so surreal. I mean, it felt like we were in there for a lot longer, but it turns out we were only in there for 90 seconds. Just based off of what I saw, in those 90 seconds alone, I can tell you that the conditions were pretty deplorable. The facilities are overwhelmed, they are overcrowded, and one of the biggest requests they're hearing from these detainees is that they just want a toothbrush.
Our thanks again to Miriam Khan, who traveled with the Vice President to Texas to see the overcrowding from those asylum seekers. I want to bring in now immigration lawyer Francis Arroyo and our very own Victoria Mol Ramirez, one of our producers who's covered immigration, spent some time down in Honduras as well. Thank you both. Francis, I want to start with you. This challenge to asylum seekers is setting off alarm bells for civil liberties advocates because federal law says that asylum seekers have a right to come to the United States through any means. And make this claim. How significant is it that the administration is going to try to keep these people out in order to make an asylum claim?
Look, we heard today the announcements of essentially barring asylum seekers if they don't ask for protections in a third country. And this is a problem because essentially all Central Americans will be barred. However, we also need to remember that the proposed regulations don't bar protections under withholding of removal and relief under the protection against torture. So it's only for asylum, which is a different type of law. However, it's very important to know and to note that this is an attack on immigrants. We've seen it in the closed borders with the migrant protection policy. I was in Tijuana a few weeks ago where I visited shelters to help fill out asylum applications, and the shelters are overcrowded. Why? Because President Trump has closed the borders. We need to remember that this situation is created by President Trump's own policies. It's a general attack on immigrants, and it's an agenda that he's trying to do so he could get more votes in 2020 and win the elections. Now, we can see the ICE raids right now. My clients are terrified. They're hiding in their homes. We're seeing it in the cancellation of parole in place for military families, where he wants to essentially cancel this program to help families or people that are in the armed forces. It's a general attack on immigrants, and it's significant, and it completely needs to stop.
A lot of people feel that way, even though the administration denies it's an attack. They say they're simply enforcing the laws in these places. Victoria, though, you've been hearing from a number of immigrants, undocumented, documented citizens, legal residents in different corners of the country who have been just living in fear over these past couple of weeks because of the threats of deportation raids. I think it's important to remind people this isn't just about those undocumented, it's about entire communities.
Absolutely, Devin. In the conversations I've had with various types of immigrants, regardless of legal status, from naturalized citizens to DACA recipients to even undocumented folks, people are on edge in general. I spoke to an undocumented woman this morning who said she spent all of yesterday, for the most part, locked up at home. She only left to go to church. She told me, when I asked her what her message to the president was, she said, "It's not fair to have us removed as if we're worthless objects. Many of us come to work. Give us a chance to prove our case. We're not all criminals, and we contribute to the economy." She says she's paralyzed with fear. She has 2 U.S.-born children. Her husband is a U.S. citizen. This would be what we call a mixed legal status family, a mixed status family. And people are just trying to go about their day, but they don't know how to.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern, even though the immediate threat of these deportation raids of millions being taken out seems to have passed for now. A lot of people even carrying their passports with them, we've been hearing. American citizens in immigrant communities carrying their passports because of fear of being swept up in these raids. Victoria Ramirez, thank you so much for your analysis. And Francis Arroyo, thanks for your take on this as well. Moving on now to the race for 2020. Immigration, of course, in the Democratic primary is a hot issue, but health care is the issue that tops the list. According to most Democratic voters today, Vice President Joe Biden is getting into the race with his plan, unveiling what he's calling the Affordable Care Act 2.0, or Obamacare Plus, if you will. It's his counter proposal to Medicare for All, which has been talked about extensively on the trail. And our Molly Nagel is traveling with former Vice President Joe Biden. She has the skinny on his health care plan. Molly, great to see you. So this is a big deal for Joe Biden because after weeks of talking about these more sweeping changes to our healthcare system, Biden is coming out with a pretty modest counter-proposal. Tell us about it.
That's right, Devin. Vice President Biden talks about how healthcare is very personal for him. And in his new proposal, he very much plans to expand upon Obamacare Plus, as you said. This proposal would build upon what is already exists, including offering a buy-in option that's similar to Medicare for people who want to buy into healthcare system, but it allows for folks to keep their private healthcare insurance if they like their current insurance. Biden's plan also includes specifics on prescription drug care, on how to deal with healthcare for rural communities, and it carries quite a hefty price tag, $750 billion over 10 years. Biden has a proposal of how to pay for that, including raising taxes on the super wealthy, making more than $1 million a year annually, and increasing the top tax bracket. But Biden also wants to focus on making it more affordable for middle-class families. That includes expanding current tax cuts that exist for folks in the middle class to help cover high health care premiums that currently exist. So clearly drawing a contrast with some of his 2020 competitors who call for a Medicare for All system. He says we shouldn't start from scratch on health care, but expand upon what is already there, citing urgency as the big need.
Yeah, a lot of health analysts say that this is probably the most practical in terms of getting it implemented. He's throwing some elbows at Bernie Sanders. Our Adam Kelsey is tracking Bernie today. And remind us, Adam, what his plan does. I think as people look at Joe Biden, they go, that might make sense. But Bernie Sanders is advocating for a much more sweeping change to our system.
Yeah, Devin, as you said, a much more sweeping change, probably the most sweeping proposal that we've seen from any of the Democratic presidential candidates. Bernie Sanders, kind of the originator of the Medicare for All proposal. Under Sanders' plan, there would be one health care plan for every American, a public health care plan that covers all of the services, whether it's routine doctor's visits, emergency services, specialists, even vision and dental care as well. And it would completely abolish private insurance if you have a plan right now through your employer employer. Over the next couple of years, as this public plan that Sanders is calling for is implemented, you would lose that private insurance and you would shift over to the public plan. So in Sanders' mind, his argument is that this is a much more simple version of some of these healthcare reform proposals. Everybody is operating under the same system, and it reduces and in some cases completely outlaws the influence of the for-profit private insurance companies, the for-profit healthcare companies that he says are driving up costs under the current plan.
All right, Adam Kelsey coming to us from Philadelphia, tracking the Bernie Sanders campaign. Thanks for your reporting, Adam, and Molly Nagel with former Vice President Joe Biden. A lot of contrast coming into view there with healthcare. Thanks for joining us today here on the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. We're here 3:30 Eastern Time every day on ABC News Live. Hope to see you here tomorrow.